Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri have just erupted inside the McLaren garage demanding answers after new FIA findings from Las Vegas revealed microscopic rule breaches so precise that both drivers now believe their own team's setup may have destroyed their race before the lights even went out. According to the FIA inspection, their skid blocks fell below the legal 9mm limit, with Piastri reaching 8.74mm and Norris falling to 8.88mm, and these values were confirmed repeatedly through measurements accurate to 1,000th of a millimeter. When both drivers learned that the illegal wear pattern on their cars was nearly identical, they confronted the engineering staff, directly demanding to know how such a critical oversight passed through preparation and how a single technical error erased every point they earned on track. And before we reveal exactly what happened inside that heated post-race meeting, make sure you subscribe right now, because the next revelations from this Las Vegas fallout will shake the 2025 championship in ways no one saw coming. The tension inside McLaren began the moment the FIA released its detailed post-race inspection report from Las Vegas, confirming that both Norris and Piastri had breached the plank thickness regulation. According to the document, the mandatory minimum is 9mm across the reference zones of the floor. When officials inspected Piastri's car, they recorded values of 8.96, 8.74, and 8.90mm. These measurements were taken with equipment precise to 1,000th of a millimeter, which meant the values could not be dismissed as fluctuation or error. The numbers were definitive and the violation was clear. The pressure escalated when the FIA turned to Norris's car and documented readings of 8.88 and 8.93mm. These values were confirmed through multiple repeated trials, each producing the exact same result. The FIA explained that because both McLaren cars showed nearly identical illegal wear patterns, the infraction could not be attributed to isolated race incidents or collisions. Instead, it pointed directly toward a systemic miscalculation within the team's setup decisions. This was the moment when McLaren staff realized that the issue was deeper than a single error. It was a structural failure. For the drivers, the discovery felt surreal. Both had executed disciplined races, avoiding heavy bottoming moments and completing their laps with precision under challenging conditions. The Las Vegas circuit demanded careful tire management and smooth driving, and both delivered exactly that. Yet none of this mattered. The FIA reminded the team that the regulation does not judge effort or execution. It judges the final thickness of the floor. If the measurement is below 9mm, the car is illegal regardless of how well the driver performed. Norris and Piastri found themselves punished not for a mistake they made, but for something hidden beneath the chassis. When the FIA recalculated the championship standings, the consequences became even more brutal. Norris lost 20 points from his podium finish, dropping him to 390 points instead of the total he expected to carry out of Las Vegas. Piastri lost his full points haul as well, falling to 366 points. Both drivers saw their title campaigns damaged in an instant. Verstappen, unaffected by any technical issue, matched Piastri's total and closed the gap dramatically to Norris. A race that McLaren believed would strengthen their position instead tore their advantage apart and reshaped the season. The engineering group attempted to explain the circumstances that contributed to the error. Practice sessions earlier in the weekend had been disrupted, which prevented the team from collecting the long-run data needed to validate suspension compression and plank behavior over a full race distance. Engineers emphasized that without this information, they relied on estimated values to determine safe ride height levels. But the FIA noted once again that the regulation is absolute and does not consider whether the team had complete preparation time. The car must meet the 9mm requirement at the finish line. Nothing else affects legality. The moment the drivers learned that both cars had almost perfectly matching illegal measurements, the frustration reached a new level. It meant the issue was not random or unlucky. It was embedded in the setup itself. The drivers interpreted this as a failure that came from inside their own team, a technical miscalculation that undermined their effort and denied them the result they had fought for. To Norris and Piastri, this error felt preventable, and the scale of the consequence resembled sabotage, even though the cause was unintentional. They were not defeated by rivals on track. They were defeated by a number hidden beneath their own car. The core of the problem inside McLaren became undeniable the moment the FIA handed over the inspection sheet with the exact measurements that disqualified both cars. Norris's skid block had fallen to 8.88 and 8.93mm at the official reference points, numbers that were confirmed through repeated checks with instrumentation calibrated to 1,000th of a millimeter. With the rule demanding a minimum of 9mm at all times, the car was declared illegal before any argument could even be considered. What made the situation explosive was how small the violation was in absolute terms and how enormous the consequence became once the FIA applied the regulation. The shock became even heavier when the team examined Piastri's numbers. His car produced readings of 8.96, 8.74 and 8.90 millimeters. These values were almost perfectly aligned with the ones found on Norris's floor, proving that both cars suffered the same structural issue. The drivers understood immediately that such uniformity could not be caused by chance. This was not a case of hitting a curb or suffering damage at a single point of the lap. It was the result of a setup configuration that had been applied identically to both cars. For Norris and Piastri, this transformed the situation from misfortune into internal responsibility. The sense of betrayal grew even deeper when both drivers replayed the race in their minds. They had completed clean laps, avoided unnecessary risks, and maintained control over their pace in the demanding cold conditions. At no point did they feel aggressive bottoming or any warning signal that would suggest the plank was wearing at a dangerous rate. This created a painful emotional disconnect. They had executed their roles flawlessly, only to learn that the race had been unwinnable from the moment they left the garage because the foundation of their car breached the regulation before they even touched the track. The FIA report offered no comfort either. The governing body stated with clarity that the regulation considers only the final measurement and ignores every external circumstance. It does not take into account disrupted practice sessions, track temperature shifts, or incomplete data collection. It evaluates the thickness of the plank at the end of the race and nothing more. This rigid interpretation is why both cars were removed from the results instantly. Norris and Piastri realized that even though they had done everything right, their fate had been sealed by a millimeter-level setup error they never had the chance to influence. The championship implications made this problem catastrophic. Norris lost 20 points and fell to 390 when he expected to leave Las Vegas with a commanding lead. Piastri lost his entire points haul and dropped to 366, placing him level with Verstappen. The drivers saw the standings shift in front of their eyes as the FIA recalculated them. What should have been a weekend of consolidation instead became a weekend of collapse. The drivers were not only angry about the lost result. They were devastated by the certainty that their championship trajectory had been transformed by a mistake buried under the car. The final element that intensified the confrontation was the near-perfect symmetry between both cars' violations. That single detail convinced the drivers that this was not a marginal misjudgment but a fundamental engineering failure. The plank had been set too close to the minimum legal limit, and once the race entered full-speed conditions the wear became inevitable. Norris and Piastri did not believe the team acted intentionally, but the magnitude of the consequence made the failure feel indistinguishable from sabotage. They had been given a car that could not legally finish the race, and that is why they demanded answers from the engineering department with a level of intensity rarely seen inside Formula One. The engineering pressure inside McLaren reached its peak the moment the team traced the disqualification back to its precise mechanical origin. The FIA inspection had not uncovered a random anomaly or a one-off failure. It revealed that the plank of each McLaren had worn down in a way that reflected a systemic setup miscalculation. Norris's values of 8.88 and 8.93 matched closely with Piastri's values of 8.96, 8.74 and 8.90. This pattern demonstrated that the ride height selected for both cars sat dangerously close to the minimum limit. Engineers realized immediately that the car had been configured with almost no safety margin, and that this left the floor vulnerable to any additional compression produced by the Las Vegas circuit. When the team reviewed the weekend's preparation, they were forced to confront how disruptions in practice contributed to the failure. Several sessions had been affected by interruptions and track corrections, which prevented McLaren from completing the extended long runs needed to measure how the car compressed under full fuel and high speed. Without these long runs, the engineers relied on partial data to predict plank behavior. In Formula One, partial data becomes a silent threat because the suspension, aerodynamic load, and tire behavior at full race speed can differ significantly from early session performance. This gap between expected values and real-world compression is what caused the plank to drift below the 9 mm threshold. The engineering group also explained how the Las Vegas conditions amplified the effect. As the night progressed, temperatures dropped and tire pressures decreased, which lowered the effective ride height of the car. Even a small reduction in tire pressure can bring the floor closer to the track surface, increasing the frequency of plank contact. Over a full race distance, this repeated contact removes tiny layers of material. The FIA's measurements proved that this wear was not chaotic but consistent across the reference zones. The combined effect of aerodynamic load, cold tires, and aggressive setup left the plank with no room to survive the demands of the circuit. The drivers became even more frustrated when they learned that curb strikes or early race impacts could not have caused the violation. If the problem had been produced by a specific moment on track, the readings would have shown irregular dips or patchy wear. Instead, the document showed uniform erosion along the measured points. This uniformity indicated that the plank had been scraping in a predictable pattern throughout the entire race distance. For Norris and Piastri, this uniform pattern confirmed that the issue was built into the setup rather than caused by anything they did in the cockpit. They had executed the race with care and precision, only to discover that the car was mathematically destined to fail. The engineers also recognized that they had pursued an aggressive aerodynamic strategy. Running the car lower can provide additional downforce and improve cornering efficiency, but only if the team has reliable data to ensure the plank remains within legal limits. McLaren attempted to optimize performance by pushing the floor height toward the edge of the regulation without fully appreciating how the Las Vegas track surface and temperature conditions would affect compression. This aggressive approach, combined with incomplete long-run data, produced a calculation that held no tolerance for natural variation. For the drivers, this translated into a sense of being placed in a losing position before the race even began.